Young and the Restless spoilers reveal the troubles in Claire's love story that make the conflict between Victoria and Victor increasingly intense. The atmosphere has never been so stifling. Victoria looked into the large mirror reflecting her eyes, realizing that she had once stood in Claire's position, covered by the huge shadow of Victor, a man who always considered family the only treasure and was willing to control everything to protect what he thought was right. Many years ago, Victoria was a young girl who dared to love, dared to face Victor's fierce opposition when she was determined to be with Cole, despite warnings, anger, and a series of heated arguments that lasted endlessly in the Newman hall. At that time, Victor firmly refused to allow Victoria to marry Cole. He made cold arguments about power, status, honor, things he thought could decide his daughter's happiness. But Victoria's heart belonged to Cole, and Victor's opposition only made the relationship more intense, passionate, emotional, and tearful. Time passed, everything changed, but there were things in Victor's heart that never changed. When Victoria and Cole officially got together, it seemed like a victory of love, but the cracks in the family still existed, silently haunting. Victoria herself never forgot the feeling of having to fight for her own love against the harsh judgment of her father, whom she both loved, feared, and resented. Now, when looking at Claire, Victoria recognized herself from the past. Claire was the crystallization of love, a testament to Victoria and Cole's efforts to overcome the storms, but also the one who was under pressure from her own powerful grandfather. Claire is no longer an innocent child but a strong, independent girl, possessing the qualities of both her father and mother, but her heart is still shaken by the expectations, scrutiny, and arrangements of her grandfather. Victor, who always thought he was protecting his children and grandchildren from dangers, accidentally became the source of all the psychological pressure that Claire had to face. Victor has never changed his views on the right to interfere in the love affairs of his children and grandchildren. After forcing Victoria to reconsider her love for Cole years ago, he now continues to use that strictness to control Claire's private life, even demanding that she choose someone who suits his wishes, just like he did with all his children. Kyle becomes the new name on the list of people Victor considers, a young man, from the Abbott family. The traditional rivals of the Newman family. But instead of using fierce opposition like before, Victor chose a colder approach. He often gave gentle but harsh comments and criticisms, making Claire gradually feel that her life was no longer hers. Claire began to live in a constant state of tension. Every time she entered the Newmans' living room, she felt like she was stepping into a fighting ring. Victor's eyes observed every gesture, word, and facial expression, as if looking for a reason to reject any decision Claire made about her love affair with Kyle. She often wondered why her grandfather could not let go of control, could not allow her to freely choose happiness like other young people. The whispers, innuendos, and conversations that lasted for hours with the reason for the safety and future of the child gradually became a burden on Claire's mind, making her exhausted and depressed. Meanwhile, Cole and Victoria went through a new and meaningful journey. After overcoming loss and pain together, they realized that they never really lost their love for each other. It was the care and watching over Claire's growth that brought Cole and Victoria closer together, rekindling the flame that they thought had gone out. They shared all their worries and dreams for their daughter, and also felt closer when witnessing Claire struggling with the pressure from Victor, the man they both loved but had to confront many times. Victoria realized that only by uniting and standing side by side could she and Cole be strong enough to protect Claire from the storms created by Victor. They both agreed to face Victor together, not only to show their absolute support for Claire, but also to prove to him that the wounds of the past had healed, that they, the people who were once the most strongly opposed, could still be happy, successful, and stronger thanks to those experiences. Victor suddenly called Cole to his office at Newman Enterprises. No longer a cold boss or a strict father, Victor took the initiative to share his worries and what he wanted for the future of his children and grandchildren. In response to Cole's sincerity, Victor decided to give him an important position in the company as a way to acknowledge that he had accepted Cole as an indispensable part of the family. It was not only a gift for Cole, but also a commitment to Victoria that he would let them be together, would respect his daughter's happiness instead of continuing to control and impose. Seeing the obvious change in her father, Victoria felt relieved, as if a burden that had lasted for many years had been lifted. But for Claire, the journey to freely choose her own path was still not easy. Every time she faced Victor, she still had to learn to stand firm, to protect her love for Kyle from the judgment and criticism from her family and society. However, the solidarity of her parents and her belief in herself helped Claire become stronger, ready to face all challenges. Victoria often confided to Claire, "There are things you need to choose and pay for yourself. But I always believe, as long as you take control of your life with a sincere heart, everything will be fine." That saying is not only a motivation for Claire, but also a message for Victoria herself, who has experienced struggles and failures, but can now smile happily with Cole, proudly watching her daughter grow up on her own path. When everything seemed to have calmed down, Victor continued to show his power in other ways, more subtle but no less stressful. He spent more time monitoring Kyle's activities, constantly giving advice, even arranging family meals with Kyle present to test the young man. Embarrassing situations continuously appeared, putting Claire in a state of always having to prove her love and courage in front of her grandfather. But thanks to that, Claire has grown up, knows how to control her emotions, and calmly handles all conflicts without offending anyone. Kyle understands very well her special position in Victor's eyes. Both a potential son-in-law and a representative of the Abbott family. He often feels suffocated by that excessive control, but instead of backing down, Kyle chooses to prove himself worthy of Claire's affection and the Newman family's trust. He proactively cooperates with Victor in business projects, patiently listens to comments, and is not afraid to express his desire to build a common future with Claire on the basis of mutual respect. After all, what keeps the Newman family united is not power or control, but love, sympathy and trust. Victoria is no longer a young girl who is controlled, but becomes a strong mother who knows how to protect her child's happiness, and at the same time inspires Claire to stand up against all pressures. Claire also gradually escapes from her grandfather's shadow, confidently asserts herself, dares to love and dares to fight for her feelings for Kyle. Victor, who has caused so much pain to his children and grandchildren, finally learns the lesson of letting go, knowing how to step back to see the people he loves live fully with what they choose. The story of Victoria, Cole, Claire, and Victor is not only a series of days of fighting for love, but also a journey of maturity, learning to forgive, sympathize, and build a real home, where each member has the freedom to live with their own heart, regardless of expectations, prejudices and pressures from the past. In Victoria's heart, anger has never been so intense. For years, she has tried to find some peace in the Newman family, hoping that her father, Victor, will understand that his children and grandchildren need to be loved, not controlled, and their fate imposed. But it seems that time has not passed enough to erase Victor's huge shadow. On the contrary, everything has become more complicated when Claire, the daughter who has just returned after many years of separation, also has to face the same thing Victoria has experienced. Victoria cannot forget the day Claire left her family's arms. At that time, Claire was just a weak child, robbed of the right to grow up with her parents because of a mistake that was not her fault. A tragedy that pushed her into the arms of strangers, making her live lost and alone throughout her childhood and adulthood. Claire's childhood memories are filled with a lack of love, fear, and a feeling of abandonment, never truly belonging anywhere. That is also the reason why when Claire returned, Victoria promised herself that she would never let her daughter suffer any more pain from this family. However, when Victoria tried to rebuild trust, to make up for the lost years, Victor began to apply the old rules that had caused Victoria so much pain. He did not accept Claire's decision on her own love life, always interfering, guiding, even making choices that seemed to come from concern but in fact were controlling her granddaughter's life step by step. For Victor, it was the responsibility of a loving grandfather, but for Victoria, it was a repetition of a vicious cycle, where young people were never allowed to grow up, not allowed to fall and stand up on their own. Victoria's anger flared even more when she realized that, despite all the events that had happened, Victor had never changed his controlling nature. She thought back to her youth, the years when Victor had controlled her love life and career, and forced her to leave Billy, the man Victoria had loved deeply, because he thought Billy was not good enough for his daughter. Every time she thought about the past, Victoria felt her heart full of scars, wounds that would never fully heal, and she was terrified that the same thing was happening to Claire, the only daughter she had ever hoped would have a different life. Victoria realized that, in Claire's eyes now, Victor was increasingly resembling Jordan Howard, a man who had controlled and manipulated Claire's life, making her live like a shadow of herself. That comparison was like a knife cutting into Victoria's heart, because she understood that as long as Victor continued to impose his will on Claire, there would come a time when she would no longer recognize the line between the person he loved and the dangerous enemy who had ruined her life. Victoria knew that if she did not stand up strongly to protect her daughter, there would come a day when Claire would leave this family once again, bringing with her pain and hatred that no one could heal. In recent days, the atmosphere in the Newman mansion had become increasingly tense. Whenever Victor and Claire were present, every conversation revolved around imposing advice, principles disguised as love but in reality just an obsession with control. Victor did not hesitate to bring up the past, reminding her that Claire had made a mistake from the moment she was born, that she needed to be grateful for being able to return to her family, and therefore, should listen to his instructions to avoid making the same mistake. Those words were like shackles, making Claire gradually feel suffocated, disoriented, doubting both her own worth and the feelings of her loved ones. Victoria painfully watched her daughter become more and more closed, cold, and withdrawn into a lonely shell that had been deeply imprinted since the years she was away from home. She knew that if she did not change, Victor would turn Claire into another version of herself in the past, a successful woman who always carried a sense of guilt and resentment, never truly free, always living under the shadow and direction of others. That, to Victoria, was the cruelest thing a grandfather could do to his daughter, his granddaughter. Victoria's greatest fear was not only that Claire would leave her family again, but also that she would look at Victor with cold, suspicious, and fearful eyes, just like the way she looked at Jordan, the man who had manipulated and imprisoned her daughter throughout her childhood. She knew that once trust was lost, all the good things Victor had done would become meaningless, and he himself would destroy the family he had tried to protect all his life. Victoria became even more determined to change everything. She began to spend more time with Claire, listening, sharing and encouraging her daughter to boldly speak her mind, to defend what she believed in. She told Claire about her youth, about the times she was forced to leave the person she loved, to sacrifice her happiness just because others thought it was good for her. Victoria did not hide the pain, the hurt she had to go through just because she could not decide her own fate, to let Claire understand that, no matter how difficult life is, only she knows what she really needs, wants, and deserves. Besides, Victoria also boldly talked to Victor, no longer being humble and hiding her emotions like before. She directly expressed her disagreement with the way he was controlling Claire, reminding him of what had happened to her, to Billy, to Cole and to the rest of the family. Victoria asserts that true love is not about control, but about giving children the freedom to choose, to fall and stand up for themselves, and to learn from their own mistakes. She says that if Victor really wants the best for Claire, he should trust her courage, strength, and heart, instead of imposing and deciding every little thing for her. Victoria understands that no one can change Victor overnight. His stubborn, self-respecting nature is what formed the Newman Empire, helping this family survive and develop through many storms. But she also believes that with the love, sincerity, and strength of a mother, she will gradually pull Victor out of the vicious circle of control, helping him learn to step back, let go, and accept the inevitable changes of the new era. At the same time, Claire gradually realizes that she does not need to endure any more pressure. She began to boldly speak up her personal opinions, firmly defending her choices, even when facing Victor. Every time she was criticized, Claire stood her ground, did not argue fiercely, did not cry and beg, just quietly showed that she was mature enough to know what she wanted, who was worthy of her love. That firmness, along with Victoria's unconditional love, gradually made Victor feel that he was losing the most important thing, the trust and respect of his children and grandchildren. Victor began to think more about how he treated Claire, remembering the old days when Victoria fell into despair and loneliness just because he did not allow her to live true to her heart. In the long nights, Victor tossed and turned in the cold office, looking back at each family photo, wondering if he had truly become a good grandfather and father, or just a selfish, arbitrary person who thought he was always right. It was then that Victor truly understood that if he did not change, if he did not learn to give Claire freedom, he would lose everything, not only his little granddaughter but also the bond and love of the family that he had devoted his whole life to protecting. After a long period of struggle and tension, the atmosphere in the Newman mansion began to change slightly. Victoria felt a calmness in the way Victor talked to Claire. The reminders and criticisms gradually became softer, containing genuine concern instead of imposition. Victor no longer tried to control Claire's every move. Instead, he tried to listen and share, although sometimes the rigidity was still present in every look and gesture. Victoria was relieved to see Claire gradually regaining faith in her family, no longer withdrawn or confused as before. The young girl began to open up more, proactively building relationships with relatives, and at the same time strongly facing all challenges in life. Victoria was proud that her daughter was able to stand up for her own happiness, deciding for herself who was worthy of accompanying her on the road ahead. Looking back on the tearful journey, Victoria understands that sometimes true love is not about holding on, but learning to let go, giving the person you love the opportunity to be free, stumble, grow up and be happy in their own way. That is also the biggest lesson that she hopes Victor will understand, so that this family will forever be a place of love, understanding, and respect, not a shadow of power, control, and pain that lasts for many generations.